Hi everyone, Stepan here. I'm going to show you my Lichessladders game I played today. If you don't know what Lichessladders is, it's a site on which you can arrange to play classical time control games on Lichess. So for me, it's a great resource, and I've joined the 60+30 rating ladder. I was recently challenged by theraccoonking, and we played a game today. So I already played one game about a week ago, and I was also challenged by a low-rated player. The way it works is you can challenge people 2 slots above you on the rating ladder, and then if you beat them, you overtake their place, you move up a place. If you get challenged, like I got challenged for this game, and you win, you gain nothing, you just keep your spot. Okay, so it's a 60+30 game. My opponent's rating is 1923, his blitz and bullet ratings are 1800 and 1900, so, you know, probably not as strong as me, although I couldn't know for sure. I did prepare for the game using his Lichess profile. You have 48 hours to schedule a game, so you can prepare like it's a tournament game, which is what I really enjoy doing. Anyway, I saw that he plays d4. And I didn't really know what to do. I have decided to play d5 in the end because I saw that he plays the slow Slav or the quiet Slav and g3 in unfavorable positions. So c4, c6, knight f3, knight f6, e3, bishop f5. And now the only challenging line is knight c3, e6, knight h5, bishop to g6 or e4, and then knight takes, bishop, h takes, and white has the bishop pair. But my opponent played queen b3, which is what he did play before. And I was happy to see this. Not only have I prepared for this game, but I actually played a tournament game in the Pula Open 2 weeks ago in the exact same line. So I'm pretty comfortable with this. Queen b6. You're never afraid of taking because, you know, if queen takes queen, your rook is open. And one thing I would like to highlight here, which my opponent didn't do, but when there's a pawn on e3 and the bishop cannot come out to f4, c5 is an extremely poor move. If c5, then queen c7. There's no pressure on b7, and black can now safely play e5 and b6, and black is simply better. Okay, not that queen b3 is a terrible move, it's just not precise. Knight c3, e6. My opponent played bishop d2, and I played h6. Now there are no more tricks with the bishop. I'm just keeping my light squared bishop. Bishop e2, knight b d7, castles, bishop e7. I don't want my bishop on d6 because c5 would force me to trade queens and activate black's rook, and I would also lose a tempo with my bishop afterwards. Okay, rook fc1. I don't really know what to say about this move. It sort of makes sense if you plan to play c5 in the future. If you don't play to play c5, then I don't think rook fc1 is a good move. Why would c5 justify it? Well, I castled, and if c5 now, then queen c7. And if e5, which will come eventually, you might have some tricks with knight d5, but not really. I mean, nothing's ever going to happen. And the rook is well placed because it supports the c-pawn, and then queen d1 followed by b4, b5 would, you know, justify having a rook on c1. But okay, I just castled, and here my opponent surprised me. He played bishop e1. And at first I couldn't really understand the move. I think my opponent played bishop e1 in order to play knight d2 and e4. e4 is obviously the main pawn break, and especially in the quiet Slav, where your bishop is stuck on d2 or on c1, or in this case on e1, you have to play e4 to open up the diagonal. Unfortunately, knight d2 e4 doesn't work because it hangs the d4 pawn. So I don't like this move. You can see the engine evaluation hopefully on your screens. So the engine says black is slightly better. Has been for a couple of moves, but bishop e1 is not... I mean, I thought I was significantly better after bishop e1. Okay, I played bishop h7, which makes sense to me. If e4 ever comes, then I don't have to lose the tempo with my bishop. And I also wanted to see what white's going to do, because this isn't a position where making a move is easy. I don't really know what to suggest for white. Rook b1 doesn't, work. I take the rook. Rook d1. Why did you play rook c1? Queen d1 loses the b2 pawn. Although maybe taking on b2 would have been risky. I'm not sure. No. I just take on b2. There's no rook b1. So it's hard to make a move. My opponent played h3. I don't know what h3 does. I'm going to be perfectly honest. If you're going to move the knight to h2 and then play f3, e4, that still doesn't work because it hangs the d pawn. And if you ever play f3, then h3 was just a weakness. So I played rook f8. And rook f8 is designed to prevent cd, because I take cd and my rook is wide open. My opponent took anyway. Again, it's hard to suggest a move. I think cd is a mistake, and you can see that the engine now increases black's advantage. If we turn on the engine, it says, what does it say? It says knight a4. I wasn't afraid of knight a4 because then there's no pressure on d5. Knight a4, queen c7, cd. I would have taken with the e pawn. Queen c7, cd. I definitely would have taken with the e pawn. And there isn't enough pressure on d5 to justify taking, so I'm not impressed with knight a4. But okay, cd5 only minus 0.2. I thought it'd be worse. At least from a human perspective, my rook is now open, and rook e8 turned out to be the most useful move on the board. Now my opponent played knight d2. And I kept asking myself, why play h3 if you're going to go knight d2? f3, I mean, I have to prevent f3. That's for sure. Maybe I don't have to, but I want to prevent f3 because then bishop f2 comes, d4 is defended, and e4 may come. So I played bishop d6, just, on f3 I played rook e3. And my opponent played knight f1, defending the pawn. Now the engine increases black's advantage, which is, it makes sense. Look at white's pieces. All of my pieces are on perfect squares. It says minus 3, 4. It plays queen b3, it plays a5, it plays h5. I considered knight f8. I didn't consider taking the queen. I didn't consider h5 for sure. Knight f8 makes sense because I'm playing for knight e6 and I'm threatening to take on d4. So white has to react. That would make a lot of sense, but I wanted to do something more active and I played rook e7, trying to double up my rooks. Now it's almost equal. Okay, f3. f3, big mistake. And I played rook a8, which is a logical follow-up to my plan. The engine plays... I did not analyze the game, by the way. I just finished it. So the engine plays queen b3. Okay, a6, fine. g4? But what did I gain? Okay, g5, why did I... Okay, long-term pressure. I mean, it makes sense. Maybe I still play for knight f8, knight g6 and try to occupy the h4 square. That makes sense. Okay, but I played rook a8. My opponent played bishop f2. And now I spent a long time thinking. At this point, I had 58 minutes on the clock, so every single move was made, quickly. And I wanted to make c5 work. So it says minus 0.8. I did play queen b3 in the end. I wanted to play c5, but I was afraid of queen b6, and taking. Why was I afraid of taking? Wait, what's wrong with bishop c5? Okay. I was afraid of taking, and I couldn't see how to make this work, because there was always knight d1 in the end. I didn't even see rook d1. I was expecting white to go knight d1 here, which is awful. Rook d1 is much better. Okay, but in any case, this did not happen. I didn't want to play c5 precisely because of knight d1. Apparently, white would have been much better with rook d1. So I traded queens first, which is correct according to the engine, and then I played a6, saving my pawn. And now I want to play c5. And my opponent played bishop d1, which is the best move. And the reason it's the best move is pretty obvious. When I play c5, the bishop isn't hanging on cd4, and also knight e2 is playable. So, okay. I couldn't decide what to do here. You can see now that the engine says g5, knight f8, h5. I played bishop d3 because I desperately wanted to trade light-squared bishops, and explaining that decision, at the time I thought if I trade light-squared bishops, I've traded off my worst piece, arguably, because it's not doing much. And I may try to occupy the c4 square if the pawn ever moves to b4. And also I'm weakening e4 by white. And if e4 ever happens, my bishop isn't shut in. So, I mean, it's an okay move. My opponent played bishop e2, and they shouldn't have traded. I took, which is a slight inaccuracy, but okay, it's not a big deal. Knight e2. And now I played c5 because I wanted to play c5. There were many variations to calculate here. The engine says knight f8, which makes sense. I mean, white is really tied down, and I kept thinking, how do I break through? So if I don't do anything, let's say I do bring my knight to e6, so what? How do I make progress? I couldn't find a way to make progress. But I saw that c5 creates this interesting position where, okay, obviously it was a mistake, white is slightly better now, but I thought that if takes, then I play knight c5, and if rook c3 I go knight e6 with tempo, and then I'm going to go d4 at some point. That was my intention. And if I play bishop c5, I didn't really like bishop c5 because of knight d4. This is bad? Okay. Bishop d4, e d4. Oh, knight b8, knight c6. That's brilliant. I didn't see knight b8. Nice. So knight c6, and I'm controlling b4. However, b4 can happen now. Okay, but then white has to give up a pawn with b5. And I also have rook e2 coming up. Okay. In any case, after c5, my opponent played rook c3, which is correct. I took on d4, knight takes d4, and I was debating between g6 and bishop b4. I've decided to play bishop b4. White is slightly better, what can you do? And rook c2, and then knight c5. Because if the rook comes to c1, I have knight d3 winning because I'm exchanging the bishop, and then e3 is going to be very weak. And if knight f5, I don't know what they do after rook e5. Oh, maybe there's knight d6. No, there's no knight d6. Knight d6, rook e7. Knight c4, knight b3, that works. Okay, so I thought that rook e5 was good enough. Let's just see. Okay, knight d6. Wait, knight d6, rook e7. Oh, there's bishop g3. Bishop g3, rook h5, rook d1. Okay. I didn't think knight f5 was playable. My opponent played rook d1, and I played g6. I don't want to allow knight f5. Bishop h4, king g7, I thought was forced. Apparently I can play knight cd7. I didn't want to deactivate my knight and allow rook c7. The engine takes on f6, interesting. My opponent played bishop e1. I took, I have to. Rook e1 and knight e6. And I don't know what my opponent should do, but I don't think he should take. I think rook d1 is a superior move, because I gain a tempo in coming to b6. He took, I took back, rook ec1 and rook b6, and in this position I was sure I was winning. I saw a very nice idea with d4. So if you don't defend your pawn, I'm going to take your pawn. And if you do defend your pawn, then I assumed that black was winning by force. but apparently it's only minus 0.4. So d4. Oh, there's rook d3. I'm an idiot. I didn't even see rook d3. I'd assume that white has to take. Taking loses, I'm sure. But rook d3, d3, knight e3. Perhaps black is still... I mean, the engine says black is still in the game. I didn't see that. This is interesting. The only line I had calculated after d4 was taking, which is losing. Knight d5. And now there are no good moves. If you go to c2, I play rook b3. And also rook e2 is coming. If you go to c5, which is what my opponent did, I play knight f4. And this, in my mind, was game over. King h2 best, okay. My opponent played rook d1, and now I couldn't decide between rook e2 and rook b3. If rook e2, I thought rook d2. And, oh, I can take on b3 now. Why am I a moron? I didn't see that I could take on b3 now. The only line I looked at was rook d2, knight d2, and then b3 is defended. But I don't have to take. Okay. So I played rook b3. My opponent played rook c2. And I should have gone rook e2 now. Rook e2, the rook's hanging. Rook dd2, rook takes. Wait a minute. Rook e2, rook dd2, rook d2, rook d2, king f6, and I'm winning? Why is this so winning? Okay, I can blockade the pawn easily. I have rook d3. Okay. Instead I found an interesting idea to play knight d3. And if rook c3, knight b2, rook b3, knight d1 seemed straightforward to me, so I played rook d8. I'm still better, but it's not that huge. My opponent played the second best move, knight g3, and I played knight d3. I was considering rook d5, but it doesn't work now. Or I thought it didn't work now, and I don't know, here and rook b4. No, sorry, the other rook. Here and rook b4. And how do I make progress? Obviously, if the knight moves, like, let's say here, then I can just take. This is a pattern I did see, but what if the knight doesn't move? So on knight g3, I played knight d3. And now it's equal on rook c3. I lost a -2 advantage. That's great. So my calculation was knight b2, rook b3, knight d1, rook b7, rook d4, and I have an outside passed pawn. But I did miss something. Maybe this is the reason it's equal. So I took, everything got exchanged off, and my opponent played knight e4, and now I realized that I'm in trouble. There is knight c5 and knight e6, which not only checks my king, but also picks up the rook. So I played a5, and I hadn't spent a long time calculating, but I figured I'd have rook d2 and knight e3 to gain counterplay, even if I lose the f7 pawn. And I may also have knight f2, knight takes h3 in some cases, if g4 is played. So I played a5, my opponent played rook a7, I played a4, my opponent played knight c5. And I have to go rook d2. That's forced. Now if rook a4, knight e3, if knight a4, knight e3, and my opponent played what I think was the best move, knight e4, attacking my rook. And I cannot repeat, if I go rook d4, then knight c5. So I have to go rook a2. And here my opponent played g4, which surprised me. I'd been expecting knight d6, knight e3, rook f7, king g8, and then, I don't know, probably rook a7. I take on g2, king h1. Wait, this is equal? Why is this equal? I thought black was winning here. Okay, let's see, knight e4. Yeah, I'm gonna lose that pawn. And also there's no rook f2 now. Yeah. In any case, my opponent played g4, which is worse. And I should have gone g5, which I didn't even consider. Knight e3 second best. But I saw a mating net. I wanted to play a3, so I did play a3. And after knight e3, I wanted to play knight f2, knight h3, knight g5, knight f3, rook h2 mate, which is exactly what ended up happening. And I'm not sure my opponent could have prevented it. Let's see. a3, apparently they could have. Knight d6, knight f2. Okay, rook f7 is a blunder. I knew that because I have knight g3, knight h3, g5, knight f3. When I play knight h3 check, you cannot go to f1 because I take. Okay, should have gone h4. How does... it helps because I don't have knight g5. This is very nice. Yeah, they can just delay rook f7. That's why it's equal. Oh, I'm so stupid. I didn't even consider h4. Now, the fact that I'm taking a pawn doesn't matter. What matters is that I have access to g5, and h4 just prevents that. You'll see what happened. My opponent played rook f7, I played king g8. And now if you play h4 now, then I can play knight h3 and... I thought rook d2? Wait a minute. If you play h4 now, knight h3, king h1, I was gonna go rook d2. Why doesn't this work? Okay, it does work. Rook a7, I just win the knight. Fine. So now it doesn't work. So my opponent played rook a7, and now I'm just winning. Now I think it's either mate or you have to give up a piece. At least that was my calculation. At this point I had slightly less than 30 minutes on the clock, and there was plenty of time to calculate everything. King h1 first. If you go king f1, then rook f2. Knight g5, and now it doesn't matter if I win the pawn on f3 or not. You can go king g1, but then I take on f3 with check, and you're losing anyway. But my opponent kept checking, and this doesn't help. I just go knight f3. There are no mates, there are no tricks with f5, no tricks with rook f7. My opponent played knight e4, I played king e6, rook a6, king d7. Apparently king e7 was better, but I don't see why. And okay, the engine says rook d6, king e7, and knight d2, giving up a piece is best. Okay, my opponent played knight g3 and just hung mate. I think it was losing anyway, but yeah, let's go back to this position. You play h4 here and you're fine. I did not see that. So all in all, I had a 95% accuracy game, which sounds incorrect considering that I dropped my advantage twice. My opponent made 2 blunders. In any case, I did win my second game on Lichessladders. Let's see the standings. Okay, so let's just see this. Let's view the ladders. Okay, my rating has been updated. I'm still in 5th place, and now you can see I can challenge the 2 guys above me. I'm gonna challenge Lichess because he's higher rated than the other guy. Okay, let's see. I beat the Raccoon King, stayed in the same place. Correct. I confirm that. I agree. I will post. Okay. So I have to play the game 14 days from now. Let's challenge him. You have successfully challenged Lichess to a game. Please make sure you contact them via Lichess messaging. Okay, I'm gonna do that. So now under my challenges, it says challenge made. Okay, I hope to climb up the ladders. Join me on Lichessladders. There's a link below. Bye bye. See you in the next one.